Hi everyone, my name is Akos. I'm your host in this brand new show. With me today, I have four exceptional guests who will be my partner in mischief. Firstly, I have Dalia, who's the director of UX research at Wise. She led the UX research team at Miro and was the UX researcher at Shopify for almost 7 years. Or as she likes to characterize herself, she's an engineer turned academic turned user researcher asking too many questions. Dalia, it's a pleasure to have you here on the show. Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much, Akos. I'm excited to be here.
Meltem is UX career coach, helping UX people grow and get to the next step in their careers. She's a former staff manager of UX research at Glovo, which is an insanely successful food delivery app. Mel, it's amazing to have you here. Thanks very much for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Thanks. Then I have David, who doesn't like me saying this, but I'm still going to say that he has over 20 years of product building experience at companies like IBM, Google, or Hopin. He's also a very successful founder and sold his company, Topi, in 2020 to Hopin. David, thanks. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me. Very excited to be here today.
Amazing. And last but not least, Matan, a climate action minus the hot air. I took this from your LinkedIn. I love this. Matan is a serial entrepreneur in the climate tech space. He has founded a number of startups and is now the business development director of Gigablue, which has been developing a unique marine carbon removal method. Matan, pleasure to have you here. Thank you. Yeah, I did try. All right, amazing. So because it's the first of this kind of show, I'll say a few words about the setup and then we jump into the content. So firstly, we're going to discuss, the five of us are going to discuss tech-related topics and themes. Some are funny, some are rather serious. So we're going to jump between serious and funny. On top of that, each show has a highlight, a particular topic that we dive deeper into. And today this theme is founder mode. Now, the concept of founder mode has been recently proposed by Paul Graham, who's the co-founder of Y Combinator. He argued that the conventional wisdom in growing tech companies to hire smart people, give them goals, and just leave them be, it is flawed. Many founders in the Y Combinator ecosystem have experienced that this kind of management style has led to devastating performance in their companies. We'll unpack this later on, but just to give you a heads up, we'll have 3 sections in the show today. The first one is related to flash news. We're going to have some flash news and discussion around them. Then we dive deep into founder mode, and then we have a true or false game about famous tech people and software. All right. Get ready. I talked a lot. So let's start with the first piece of news, okay? And I'd like to invite you to don't be polite. Jump into it if you hear something that you can relate to and something that you like. Now, my first article, it's something that really caught my eye. It's related to an app, and it's called the Death Clock app. Like $40 annual subscription. You could have a clock ticking down on your phone, showing you how much time you've got left. But it also gives some recommendation how you can postpone the moment of judgment. Have you ever used such a clock? What are your thoughts on? Do you want to have that on your phone?
I'm just a bit curious about about the business model behind this thing. I mean, like, is this whole thing going towards, like marketing graves? Or is this thing going towards, like, getting you into adopting some kind of habits that will then end up being like, what kind of consumerism? Like,
maybe it's a very expensive prank, that some investors thought to put out there.
I feel like that's the only way I might respect it. If it was because I feel like, why is it a subscription? Just give me the number. Am I going to keep paying for the rest of my life to see the clock tick down? Like, I can just make that. So unless it's going to like push recommendations, but I'm like, what are the recommendations? Who's providing the recommendations? If it was so easy to hack living longer, do I need an app for that? Just so many questions. I hope it's a
Yeah, as another UX research professional, I can't help but agree, Dalia, as well, because I imagine that there is this gamification element where the app should either give you suggestions or ways to, I don't know, change your lifestyle, diet, exercise. So maybe today I go on, it says I'm gonna die when I'm 85. Tomorrow it's gonna be 95. Maybe there are ways that this number keeps on changing. That's the only way I guess people will keep on use it, right? If that's a real thing.
Yeah, and I think that's
Yeah.
exactly what they're going to be doing, right? I think the number of days you have to live or number of seconds, I forget what it is just because it's buzzworthy. But eventually, I'm sure it's going to be some kind of life coach app where you have, lifestyle and health and food and etc. All of, so I think but we are talking about it today, and that pretty much sure that was the intention of this new, lifestyle experience.
Just a generational question. Did everyone here read Paulo Coelho?
Of course.
So, so there was like The Alchemist. There was The Alchemist, but then there was also like another book called Veronica Decides to Die. You know that one?
Yes.
Okay, so it's about a girl who commits suicide or tries to commit suicide, but then it doesn't work, so she gets into a hospital, and then they tell her, "Listen, like you're good to go, but there's only one day left." Right? And like eventually it's not one day left. She has a whole long life to live. So it's a bit of about making choices as if every day counts, blah blah blah. So I'm wondering if it's also gonna give some kind of motivational and wisdom quotes, Paulo Coelho style, in your prompts.
I hope so, but I also think that even the name, like the death clock, no, that's it's ingenious.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it.
Yeah.
I think it should also give you a little electric shock, just showing you that you're still alive.
I feel like what it's going to boil down to is just yet another thing that collects way too much information about you, that then has to find a way to figure out how to monetize that information, and that the people who are going to be talking about this a month or 10 years from now are basically Silicon Valley bros who are going to be comparing notes on their death clocks and lifestyle tips. Like, I don't see this being like an average person sort of topic of conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, talking about Silicon Valley, I've recently read that OpenAI is funding academic research into algorithms aiming to predict the moral judgment of humans. And the idea is to create a product which can act as a moral compass for humans in situations. And one of the examples that article brought is that this algorithm, this product could help people decide who to grant a kidney, like someone waiting for transplantation. What are your thoughts on involving AI in moral judgments?
I feel like I'm way too cynical today. I'm like, I don't have a problem with AI. I have a problem with OpenAI being moral judgment.
Dalia, we're going to be good friends.
So I tell you, my first reaction was that it's such an easy path. No, it feels like there's a difficult choice that you're facing, and all of a sudden you can offload that onto an algorithm, and then it's all of a sudden not your choice, and it's just too tempting.
But I feel it's a little bit like, remember we were discussing prioritization, right? At the end of the day, when you have a prioritization algorithm framework, you can go to people and say, look, it's not my decision, I run IC and that's what it is. In practice, you know very well that it never works, right? People are human and they will want to prioritize over the framework. And I think that's a little bit what's going to happen here. Let alone the fact that the OpenAI is behind that, but I'm going to let Dalia comment on that.
I just feel like if you're trying to I mean, like, I understand making the hard decision, but it's like, it's also, if you want to punt off the responsibility for making a hard decision, I would just be like, oh, like Bob from that department made it. I'm sorry, it wasn't me. Like, do I need an OpenAI product to shift blame onto something else? I don't know.
I don't disagree with it either. If this is about outsourcing responsibility, where once again AI tools give you this polished outcome and make it very flowery and beautiful and final, then I also see the complications. But I'm also not categorically against a tool inspired by this example that Akos just gave us, where it tells you the checklist of things that you should be considering so that you're, as a doctor or as a decision maker, policymaker, or whoever, don't forget as a human error A, B, and C. So I can imagine an empowering tool to make sure that people don't fall through the cracks, that it empowers you, but doesn't tell you this is the final answer, this is your right answer. But maybe a tool to sort of cover up the human errors or inconsistencies that we might also have. So it depends on, I guess, how it's formulated, right?
I was brought up by a doctor who lives from transplanting organs in people, and my mother's a psychologist who does like mental assessments for people before the transplantations.
Oh, wow.
So like two points about this thing, just from like things I heard back in the day. So first of all, like I think there are way more physical properties you have to consider before a transplantation than if someone is nice or vegetarian or likes dogs or not. Okay, like this is like, if they don't have the right blood type or they're obese or something like this, none of the moral traits were going to help. And secondly, like there are many aspects of like the ability of a person to live through a transplantation, like mentally to cope with that, to get up and like live a new life with this, or handle the difficulties and some of the like residual diseases that come with this. So I'm really curious about like the problem research that was done, if any, before that. Like, did they actually go to doctors and they told them, listen, like we've solved everything but this point, like we can't decide morally who gets that kidney. Like I'm really not sure that this is like the right problem to jump on. I don't want to sound like a hater, but would be interested to know what kind of research was done behind this.
Yeah, interesting. And I wonder if there's going to be a spin-off of this app that I could use in like arguments with my wife, because she argues so well that she seems to be having the upper hand, and I'd love to have a companion who I can say, sorry, honey, objectively speaking, right? It's not me arguing with you, like. We'll see. We'll see. She might just ban my phone from home. All right. Let's talk about let's stay on this AI topic. And Dalia, you also mentioned what information tools collect from us. So I saw that recently Atlassian acquired a company called Rewatch, which is an AI-powered meeting note taker, which does like screen recordings, and it's also Video Hub. And to quote from the article that I read, Atlassian is saying that once the integration is complete, the Loom AI agent will be able to join Zoom, Google Meet, and Microsoft Teams meetings. It will create a full transcript, meeting notes, action items that it can automatically correlate to Confluence pages, Jira issues, and service tickets. Sounds too good to be true, but I was wondering, you're also doing many of your meetings online in a digital format. What are your thoughts around having meeting bots in your calls?
Meltem, I felt like you had opinions about this.
I actually have some of them. Well, by the way, this is like just one human moment. I feel that it's extremely important to be respectful and not to talk to each other on top of each other. So I was like, hey, maybe someone is just willing to pop out, I was like, hey, like I can't raise my hand, there's nothing down there that allows me to, like, what I was like, okay, I'll be very kind, because I'm Turkish, I am like overly excited usually about just about everything, so I want to be cautious. But like in the way that this sort of tooling like Rewatch applies to my work, so for instance, when it comes to the sessions that I hold as a UX career coach, a lot of it is also very intimate, very private, and I pay a lot of attention to the confidentiality of it. So normally I'm a bit against any tool being part of this conversation, and especially if I do group coaching sessions. There is ones that I've held, for instance, what is it like to experience pregnancy in tech? This is a very sensitive subject for many women, and it's going to be a confidential setup where many people will share their intimate experiences. I don't want anyone joining in, bringing their AI note taker or whatever into that conversation, because that'll inevitably impact how others will respond and what others will be feeling comfortable to share. I think it changes the performance of the meeting and the activities and what people are willing to mention, knowing that they are going to be, recorded in that way. So I'm for sure there's going to be reasons why it'll be useful, but not in every circumstances.
Do you think we're gonna forget about some of these facts? Because I'm thinking, I was looking for comparisons, and I think when we search in Google, I think by now, like when we think about it, we know that everything that we search about is stored by Google. But because we've been searching for so long, I think it's at least I can let me talk for myself. I'm not going to generalize it, but I don't even question. It's not even a conscious thing anymore, and I don't even question the validity of collecting all that and storing all that information about me. And that's just one thought or question that I wanted to leave with you. How do you, the more we're exposed to that, aren't we gonna like challenge it less in the future? Not because it's less privacy intruding, but because we're used to it.
I want to jump on this just for a second, because I've had a lot to say about note-taking apps, and I have a personal policy that I deny their entrance to any meeting. Like if someone wants this, they have to explain or they have to ask for this. It's not automatic. I mean, I started doing this after some people stopped showing up to meetings and send their note taker. I'm like, it's like, like talk to my palm. I'm like, oh, fuck you. I'm not gonna do that. So like one thing I do with people is I quickly press on the privacy disclaimer. And I ask them a small question if they would feel comfortable that their business secrets that are shared in this meeting under an NDA will be used for training a model that would then be used by their competitors to create a better offering. And they say usually no. And I say, okay, so we're done with this thing. So that's like one side of this. I think that we're very naive in the way that we are treating the secondary use of this data. The other aspect is that I really think that there's like a whole setup that brings the role or the existence of professionals to being in meetings. Okay, like many people have just like a covered calendar with meetings, and what you do as a manager, mid-manager, entrepreneur, whatever, is like spend your day in front of the screen with meeting people on Zoom. And like I don't know, like I'm not quite sure that all of this is justified, and whether we should cherish this and like build the whole fancy installation around it. Maybe like cherry picking your meetings or making it a bit more difficult or a bit more qualitative by using this old technology. Maybe that makes a bit more sense in terms of outcomes. It's something that definitely worth like a Harvard level research one day, probably like a year or two from today. Not by me.
Yeah. I think it also kind of misplaces the intended outcome of the meeting of like, oh, I've produced a bunch of notes. And it's like, cool, now you're drowning in notes, just like we're drowning in data, and there's more information that we know what to do with. But there's a sense of safety in that we recorded the session or we brought the AI. So like, I'm one of those people whose calendars is covered usually wall to wall with meetings, but I would say like 80, if not 90% of my meetings are one-to-one, in which I'm working through a problem with a person or kind of, taking something, breaking it apart. And the note-taking is not the important part of the meeting. The note-taking might be something I do if I really want to remember something afterwards, but it's in the discussion that we're having. It's almost like a way of pairing on work. It's a way of working together rather than like, oh, it's just another meeting after another meeting. And so it kind of just begs the question of like, at what point are we just giving up on the actual work, and replacing it with all of these shortcuts and like outputs that give us the illusion that we're doing the work and then replacing ourselves in the meetings? I don't know what the end goal is here. Like, what are we striving towards when we're kind of, we're equating these outputs with what is actual work and what is actual collaboration?
I don't have much to add. I feel that we're not big supporters of. To go back to. By the way, I'm very much like Matan. I think Matan. I also decline, all of these note takers, etc., etc. I don't think, especially when we haven't had a discussion prior to the necessity of having such a tool. I think there's already information overload. So, like Dalia was saying, I'm not sure, the goal of a meeting is to produce notes. If that if the goal of the meeting is to produce notes, probably we didn't even need the meeting in the first place. You could have produced those notes beforehand. I feel that the more we have those note takers, etc., eventually it's going to be just a bunch of note takers going into a meeting, exchange agents, exchanging information and speed. Eventually, that's probably what's going to happen, right? At that point, I would argue that the meeting is not even necessary. To me, a meeting is really to connect. Like Dalia was mentioning, one-on-ones. I had a lot of one-on-ones in my career, and the goal is not note-taking, is connecting, having empathy, and these are not taking worthy meetings. But to go back to Akos's point, I think big tech definitely bets on the fact that we will forget about those things eventually. And instead of seeing a note taker, they will be embedded and it's going to be a tiny little thing at the bottom. And that's the real risk, because I think that's what's going to happen eventually in Google Meeting, Zoom, et cetera, and that's going to be the big risk. And, I don't have a good solution against that. It's going to be just like another Google search. I think you're right.
There we go. A last flash news, and this is something different, but it caught my eye. So on November 18th, 2024, the air quality index in Delhi hit 494, plunging the city's pollution levels into the severe plus category. And just to give you a hint, at this level of pollution, you're gonna feel itchy throats, persistent cough, fever, or even breathing difficulties. And not to mention like the respiratory diseases and cardiovascular problems that can develop in kids and young people. Now, the city, one of the things the city does is turning to tech to combat smog levels. And they have intervention ideas that include artificial rain, an anti-dust campaign, and mobile anti-smog guns. Now, Matan, you're the clean tech person, so I'm sure you'll have a few thoughts on this. But in general, I wanted to start from the point of what do you think of us, like as mankind, doing things and developing solutions to prevent like an already produced bad result, and just trying to clean up the mess that we created, as opposed to investing time and effort into not having a space in this case that is so bad to live at in terms of air pollution.
Yeah. So there's a term in climate tech that's called like the scale of green. Okay, some people are bright green and some people are deep green. This is like and there are like different shades across it. So
the 50 shades of green. No?
The 50 shades of green, sexy as it sounds. So like dark green would be, like doomists or people like Greta, who would say like, okay, let's cut off completely fossil fuels. Let's degrow. Let's maybe reverse capitalism in some way. While the bright green would be the Elon Musks of the world, who would say like, let's not stop our growth. To the contrary, let's keep growing. Let's just move to other forms of energy or solutions. And such people in like the extreme side of the story would also think that it's possible to keep doing a problem on one side and working on a like more potent solution on the other side, and they would offset each other. What I came to realize is that neither really works. I know it sounds like lukewarm and disappointing, but you have to have somewhere in the middle. But when we say why don't we just stop polluting this much? So I think it's really important to think about the human cause of this pollution. Okay, the human cause of this pollution is burning things to get cheap energy, and it has to be cheap because the people there don't have enough money. Okay, so we might live in places that have enough money to produce energy cleaner and cleaner, and grant like a good quality of air and whatnot. But if they don't have that alternative there, we can't just take it away from them, because this has also a negative impact on lives. I mean, you need that for living. So I actually very much respect those solutions, and it's very good to see that municipalities are taking responsibility on this, because this is another key thing in climate, that local action is much more capable than government or international level. But also, like I think there's a certain level of reflection that places can do about like, okay, what do we know to do really good that can help us? So if it's about like, generating less waste, for example, I know if people in India are very good in consuming to the very end everything that they own, or reducing movement, or walking more. Okay, so some of those things can be like, already existing solutions that you don't have to shop far for. Or stop
Um,
breathing, that also would solve the problem in a couple of different layers.
yeah. Why waste so much air? Right?
Yeah.
Any other thoughts to add, or we just take Matan's thoughts on here?
Akosh, I think you'll
Okay.
need to call names to avoid
Yeah, no,
all of
and I realize it's difficult because I asked the question where one of us is a true, deep, like real expert, and anybody saying anything after Matan.
Yeah,
And Matan,
that.
Matan, you know what happened? It's like when the CEO walks in the room and starts the meeting by saying their opinion, right? And then everybody's afraid to really say what they think, because who are they to say that? So next time we talk about climate, you're going to be the last.
I'm going to be the last.
And
But at least we're going to talk about climate. Like that's much more attention than climate gets usually in the media.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move to the main topic of today, which is founder mode. And I have like a short introduction here, and I'm just going to throw a few balls in your direction, and feel free to take any angle on them. And what I wanted to say is that when you look at the last couple of decades, I think it's a fairly dominant trend that tech founders have become the emblematic heroes of our age, and they are idols worshipped like Olympic athletes or rock stars. And in fact, you may know that if you're a Marvel fan, that Elon Musk is said to have been the key inspiration for the portrayal of the Iron Man by Robert Downey Jr. And what I'm really curious about, and what you think about, is we oftentimes attribute the success of the tech companies to a single person, right? You have Steve Jobs at Apple, you have Elon Musk, Tesla, you have Bill Gates, Microsoft. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are. To what extent did their individual geniuses contribute to the success of these companies?
I feel like that's one aspect of it. So every company I've worked at was a founder-led company. And each of those founders came with their own disclaimer and this sort of like own cult of personality and their own, like, this is how they are and this is whatnot. And I think that I agree that to be a founder, you need a very specific set of qualities that aren't necessarily represented in the vast majority of people. But my experience working inside these companies is that, like, it is not, on the inside, it's not that sort of like single-handed person running the show and there's nobody else who's doing anything. I think that person tends to be the most prominent person. I've often heard it described as your CEO should also be a really good PR person. A lot of the work is actually going out and representing the company and speaking to the media and being that figure that represents. So it is part of the job. And I think because of that, it becomes easy to forget that there are a lot of other people on the inside. You just don't really see it the same way. I think one of the tweets that you had shared by Jessica Lesson from The Information was that Steve Jobs was a really great CEO, but he had Tim Cook, who was a manager on the inside. And I can probably name the few people on the inside of every company whose faces and names you wouldn't see, but who are very much involved in running things on the inside. So I don't know, maybe that's just the way I operate on everything. I don't think the world is black and white, and I don't think it's either or, and I don't think it's dogmatic. I think you need a lot of different kinds of things. And it definitely helps to have a CEO who's very opinionated, who has the ability and the interest to get into the weeds. The term genius is a bit loaded. I feel like the term intelligence is a bit loaded. Like, how do we even quantify or talk about that? But I feel like you need that, and you need people who are also going to be good at doing the other things that the CEOs don't necessarily have the capacity or the interest, or in some cases even the talent for being able to do.
I think the main asset of those superstar founders or stuff like that is that they're inspiring and they attract talent. that then get shit done. I think that's really what happens. I've worked with a few great founders. I've known few of them. I do not know Elon Musk personally. He has repeatedly actually succeeded in many businesses, so he might be out there. But otherwise, those superstar founders, I think there's a big element of luck, communication, that triggers inspiration, and that attracts in turn talent, and then you have a virtuous circle. I think that's even pretty much what's happening, to be perfectly frank. And I don't want to by the way downplay the founders and what they do, etc. But I based on my experience, at least, I've never really come across the one person that changes the game entirely.
I agree with both of what Dalia and David said, and one thing I can't stop thinking is eventually we're gonna share this episode with our listeners, and they might be thinking, am I that superstar, genius, intelligent founder? Well, not really. I haven't found anything yet. So am I not that good? And the answer is no, absolutely not. There is always gaps. And I think what you're saying is true. And that also maps onto my work with the founders as well. I think there is every single individual in there, some skills, and they need to be smart enough to know what they are missing so that they can recruit people with complementary skills so that together as an organization you can grow. I think from a storytelling perspective, especially like this American style movies, we want that hero, like that is the founder. And I'm not gonna underestimate, of course, that person's intelligent, ambitious, driven, charismatic and all that, but a human being, an individual around never gets anything done sustainably, predictably in the long run and so on. So I always think that, yeah, there has to be a team. And everyone, and that's why I guess I don't want to make it like a self-promotion, but that's why I'm so driven to do my work as a career coach. You need to figure out where you need to be to have your best colors to shine, because we all have that founder inside of us, and all those founders also need someone that is not as shiny and beautiful and charismatic. Like we all have a place in this.
Yeah, I want to add something about VCs saying things about founders. I mean, and I have a lot of respect to anyone who's able to make any kind of business that could be a grocery shop, a startup, or a VC. Okay, like it could be really anyone. Super respect. But like I think that talking in those kind of superlatives is a bit flattening. Okay, like people are three-dimensional at least, if not 4 or 5-dimensional. Okay, and talking about a template of a founder or those traits or that kind of thing, I think it's very shallow or very superficial, and it sounds to me almost like an invention of VCs to kind of spice up the very rather dull experience of investments. Okay, because most of investments, when you look into that, or if you've been into that in your life, so it's a lot about like numbers and de-risking things, and also technically separating your emotions from some of the analysis, and then you have to basically go and sell this thing to the world and to your LPs. Okay, so some of it is like really turning things into like mascot cards or stuff like that. Okay, like to baseball cards, and this is how the discussion feels. And what's kind of devastating is to see people who try to step up into a founder's position, and they don't realize that real life doesn't really look like that. Okay, it's not that amazing. Okay, it could be very daunting. It might not be so glorious every day. Things don't get solved so quickly. So sometimes this kind of flattening is even, I think, dangerous to the ability of great people to succeed. And about personality of founders, so I really can't agree enough with this thing, just because I've seen both. Okay, I've seen like very very good, dominant, inspiring founders, and I've also seen others who didn't really have it, and was much more difficult to become a believer, a follower of them, and to really help them get to the place that they wanted, maybe because it was also not so clear what they wanted, or how they wanted to achieve that. So yes, I think the personality is important, but again, like, classifying that into genius, not genius, or, like breaking the population of the world by, I know, their IQ or their EQ or whatever, it sounds a bit unfair. I know, like, great founders of businesses who are definitely not VC investable because they're not in the areas of interest, but, like, I wish myself I had the same stamina and wisdom that they have to run their businesses, even if it's, a restaurant.
I feel like
Yeah.
the flattening is something that I definitely agree with because I find, especially when I was younger, the way that people like Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg like would present on the internet or the tidbits of their lives that people would see, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, they sleep 3 hours a day. That's the only way to become a successful billionaire. So I'm gonna go and only sleep 3 hours a day, or I'm gonna, drink
And
Soylent
then
and
I'll
not.
become a billionaire just because I slept 3 hours, right?
Exactly, exactly. So it just becomes like these things where it's like, oh, that's the secret. They're like these eccentric people who don't function like the rest of us. And the trick is, whereas like a lot of this stuff is like, it's part PR, it's part tidbits. They've also got huge teams of people who take care of them all day. And so, they're operating on a different level. But I think we're taking small elements of
So,
it and then just running with it as if
yeah.
that's what inherently makes someone a
It
genius.
I also want to relate to the points that more of you made about the team around a particular person, and when I think of very successful VCs in the world, I'm going to start a bit far away, like an Andreessen Horowitz or Y Combinator. They're also a little bit of self-fulfilling prophecy because they're so successful. Very successful or very promising startup founders go to these companies, so they get to pick the cream of potential opportunities, and they have access to these people. And I assume if you're an Elon Musk or if you're on the top, someone very successful, you also have access to minds and people around you that I wouldn't, or people in regular jobs, which creates this virtuous wheel of you've already been successful, and then you have access to amazing teams around you. So the chances of you staying successful, becoming even more, it's quite high.
Yeah,
I
that
fully agree. And there's just like something else I felt like mentioning, going on with what Dalia mentioned, like they sleep 3 hours, they eat this, they eat that, like these sexy superhuman creatures, but they're also very disposable. Today they're on the top, and tomorrow there is this drama, and everybody hates them, and they make the biggest mistake. So there's also a point to be made of the importance of people behind the scenes that run the show. They do the work, but they don't have these names that are so extremely good or extremely bad in the eyes of people. Maybe it's less about that fame, maybe it's less about being so present, and it's maybe more about doing the work behind the scenes. I think we should also honor that and make it something for young people to strive for.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, there's one point which I want to bring from Paul Graham's article, because I really like this one, and he makes things concrete in here. And he argues that the primary reason this leave space approach doesn't work is because there are a lot of fakers, right? And quoting from his article, he's saying that the hire good people and give them room to do their jobs. Sounds great when it's described that way, doesn't it? Except in practice, judging from the report of founder after founder, what this turns out to be is that you hire professional fakers and you let them drive the company into the ground. So he's saying that a lot of times when founders like hire this kind of middle management or C-level, they hire people that the way I interpret it is that they're not really into that company. They're not emotionally attached to that, and they just do things for their own motivation and for their own success, and not necessarily for their companies. What are your thoughts on this argument that many people in the middle layer are? I'm sorry to use, but I'm just going to use the fakers. It's a bad label. But I'm going to stick to that.
they definitely exist, right? I mean, they do exist, but what I would say is that they don't do it intentionally. It's more the environment probably that pushes them a little bit to behave as such, right? And I would argue that it's actually the founders' responsibility to make it such that they also do feel like founders in their own role, to some extent, right? Because no one wants to waste 10 hours a day of their life. No one wants that, right? No one wants to fake. So definitely, it's definitely happening, but I would not put the responsibility on the fakers themselves.
On the middlemen.
Yeah.
I think there's fakers at all level, to be honest. I don't know why middle management gets like singled out. I think there's people who are junior who are faking their way all the way to like executives who are faking their way.
Absolutely.
And I think
The startup wisdom is to fake it until you make it. No, isn't that one of the most quoted wisdoms in the startup world?
I don't disagree. And
There you
there's
go.
like something more to be shared on that. So when I work with my coaches, for example, that faking things, it just becomes a problem where when we dig deeper into this challenge, we understand that people that we stigmatize or identify as fakers, maybe they're just the kind of people that do things a little differently from us, and we never actually bother to take the time to understand what is that they do, why they do it. Do we even have somewhat standardized criteria to understand what success looks like, and how do we expect within this organization to work? So I would even be careful before labeling anyone a faker. Like, are they really faking it? Or what they prioritize or their ways of work, it just doesn't seem to be aligned. Or it's simply that I don't have enough visibility to understand what is that they are doing and how is it that they're doing it. So I'll be very careful to, just like tell like, oh, he's a faker, she's a faker and all that. Maybe someone thinks you are the faker. So it's possible.
Yeah, it's definitely like, something that could be in the eye of the beholder. But I want to kind of agree with David here, because I mean, from my observations, let's say I would call it like bigger tech, or like bigger than a startup tech, okay, where you do have like at least two ranks of middle management. I can't say that this is the most efficient and proficient thing I've seen in my life. Okay, and when you look at it with some kind of empathy, okay, and you say, okay, like people didn't get into their profession or get into their work, out of will of doing nothing. Okay, there's a grain inside everyone that wants to do good, but there are circumstances or setup, I think, like David said, that like lead to that. So if we take a Marxist look at this, so it has a lot to do with the dynamics of power. Okay, like you're there, you're kind of the bourgeois here, but you don't really have all the power to hold the capital of the world, or to make the decisions, or to navigate everything as you might be. There's also some kind of maybe lack of appreciation upwards, because you see some things where you don't have the power to change them, and that leads to like a churn of motivation and then a churn of performance and whatnot. And fixing that, I can definitely tell from my experience. I know this thing's gonna be broadcasted. I don't care. I did have some people who were like, middle manager, and they were defunct, and the relationship ended up ending. But like, it's very hard to end it. Okay, and it's very easy to get away with it, and it's also very easy to wrap up nicely that episode of your life and then go do the same thing elsewhere. And then this is a place where, like sometimes you go into the kingdom of vanity called LinkedIn, and you see like, people kind of, playing ladders and snakes and moving from, from one spot to the other. I'm like, Jesus, like, how can people get along with this? Because eventually after a while you do lose some of the abilities, but getting someone accountable to what they're supposed to do, or even defining that's also a very hard task. Okay, and if the company is pumped with VC money and IPO money, okay, and it's like hyper growth, and you say, okay, like, what's the cost of leaving this person here? Okay, why do I have to have the headache of, just firing someone or straightening them? Okay, no need, right? So this is how this happens. And then investors like, like Fulgram or such, discover this culture, and then they freak out, okay? Because some of those people sit on like, 200, 300K salaries in the Valley, and they literally contribute shit, okay? So yeah, that's a point where this should be considered some kind of fraud.
Yeah, but going back to David's point, isn't it the responsibility of the founder to hire the right people? Because what we're saying is that we observe bad examples of like fakers and various, but there was someone who hired them. There is someone whose responsibility is to agree on goals, to agree on their career path, to track it. But there's we're not talking about that person's responsibility, and I'm not absolving the person who was a faker, but it's not like faking in isolation.
Okay, but I think that this is like the main message he has there about, like, you know, what we call quote unquote founder mode. Okay, it's like hyper accountability about everything, or about everything that matters. Okay, it doesn't rate that explicitly. It also comes with no accountability of anything that doesn't matter. Okay, because you can't stretch across everything with the same intellectual quality. Okay, but yeah, so you can always say, okay, this is the founder's problem, and this is the founder's problem, this is the founder's problem. Okay, but you know, like in many other professions, okay, there are ethics, okay, of how you should behave. Okay, if you're a doctor and you work for a hospital, okay, there are some ethics for being a doctor. Okay, the manager of the hospital cannot go and check every day if you stitch your patients, you know, in the right way, or if you plug them, you know, in the correct way to the infusion. Okay, there are some ethics. So maybe you know, there's like an underlying call here for ethics, and you know, making like real implications on ethics.
I think there's that, and then there's also like how you're choosing to prioritize your time. So where I've seen things go sideways and founders honestly lose respect is that when they're so into the weeds that people have to question if this is how you think, if this is what you think is a good use of your time and money instead of running this company. So, I mean, not being a founder myself, but, you know, I lead a team and I have to decide where are the aspects in which I need to drill in deeper? What are the things where I need to control quality, and what are the things that I can be kind of hands off? So to give you an example, like one of my loose rules of thumb is that if someone is on like a junior to midweight, maybe even senior level, I want to see the work before it ships. I want a dry run of the presentation. I want to see the report, because chances are that if you ship it to your team and then I spend a whole bunch of time giving you the feedback, the team's not going to read it again down the line. And so it's just the quality control where I need to stay on top of it. Whereas someone who is staff level and above, so above senior, I'm far more confident for them to ship their work because I've looked at their work for so much over the years, and there's a reason at that level. And I've had it in the past where I had an instance of something like that backfired, where a staff researcher presented to the CEO and it did not go well. And I had a moment where I questioned, should I have interfered more? Should I have micromanaged more? And I remember coming to the realization, like, no, because this was one time out of like dozens and dozens of time across my most senior people. And it's not a good use of my time. Like, I'm happy to step into that situation, audit what happened, give the recommendation, kind of help repair. That is a better use of my time than to start going in and looking after every single person's work who are very
over the shoulders of people.
Yeah, so it's prioritizing, it's thinking about what's a good use of my time. What's a good use of my time for the business as well? Like, I'm getting paid a certain amount of money. If someone were to track me and hold me accountable for how I'm spending my time and how that business money is being spent, where do I need to put that time? So I think it's my point earlier about it's not black and white. Things are often far more nuanced than we think, and you have to pick and choose. It's not founder mode or manager mode. It can be both depending on the context and what needs to be done.
Absolutely.
Let's do a true or false, okay? A couple of quick ones. I'm going to read out a short article, and then I'm curious what you think. Is it true or false? All right? So, Mark Zuckerberg has teamed up with T-Pain to release a unique version of the 2002 hip-hop anthem, Get Low, originally by Lil Jon and the East Side Boys. Under the collaborative name of Z-Pain, the duo reimagined the acoustic cover of the song, which was crafted as a tribute to Zuckerberg's wife, Priscilla Chan, marking the anniversary of the first meeting at a college party where the song was played. And this song includes lines like, "To the window, to the walls, till the sweat drops down my balls." True or false?
False?
I hope false.
Please?
I want to say false, but he's been wearing a lot of chains lately, so I don't know what's real anymore.
Yeah. I'm with Dalia on this one. Like, things are going funny here. So yeah,
it's true. Go on YouTube. Check it out.
I don't know. I trust you, Akos.
Yeah.
Okay, but like Matan, what?
Founder time. I mean, I guess Mark Zuckerberg thinks it's a good use of his time. So there you go.
It's good use of his time. Okay. Matan, if you need to drop out, go. I'll just shoot it.
I'm going to.
Okay,
Pleasure seeing you every time. Bye.
Bye, Matan.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, let's talk about Jeff Bezos. One particularly amusing story from Jeff Bezos' childhood involves his ingenious, if somewhat mischievous, method for keeping his siblings out of his room. At the time, Bezos was deeply engrossed in a project. He was working on a replica of Mona Lisa and wanted to focus without distraction. Okay, to ensure his privacy, he rigged an alarm system that would shock anyone who tried to enter his room. According to the legend, if his siblings, Christina and Mark, attempted to open the door, the knob would give them a mild electric shock. This inventive alarm allowed Bezos to maintain his concentration on his masterpiece. True or false?
False.
Yeah, I just can't picture him painting the Mona Lisa. So I'm going to go with false.
Yeah, the Mona Lisa is the thing. The alarm, I would have said true, but the Mona Lisa sounds...
What?
So I'm going to go with false.
I overdid it. The alarm is true. Mona Lisa is false. And no electric shock. He just rigged the alarm system.
Okay.
All right. Third one. By typing "do a barrel roll" into the Google search bar, the screen will spin a full 5 times, accompanied by the catchy tune "You Spin Me Right Round Like a Record" by Dead or Alive. This fun feature is a nod to the 90s video game Star Fox by Google, which has delighted many for its humorous take on the iconic barrel roll maneuver. Now, the hidden feature is a prime example of Google's habit of sneaking playful elements into the search engine, ensuring that users get more than just the usual results.
What's a barrel roll?
I'm also lost.
Oh, it's when like an airplane does this full turnaround
Goes like this.
in the air. Yeah.
I would go for true. I don't see why not.
Yeah, I would say true.
Okay, try it afterwards. It's false.
Wow.
It does turn around, but there's no music
So it's
with
half
that.
true.
It's half true. Half true.
Brilliant.
You have to
because
pick true or false.
Yeah, but like the really good lies always have a grain of truth in there, no? Like if you could, yeah. But I overdid it with the Mona Lisa. I think that that gave me away.
For you. Very good.
Okay.
It's really nuances.
I have a last one. In 1997, in the 1997 version of Microsoft Excel, users stumbled upon a hidden flight simulator. This feature, activated through a specific sequence of commands, allowed users to fly through a rudimentary 3D world. As you navigated the skies, you could encounter scrolling messages, some of which listed the names of the development team behind Excel. Unfortunately, this feature was later removed from Excel, making this nostalgic piece of computing history. True or false? Flight simulator in Microsoft Excel 97.
Go with true.
Yes, I'll do as well. Just because you
Plausible.
didn't balance true and false.
Yeah, as a developer, I could totally do this sort of stuff. So I would go with true as well.
It is true. And the scrolls of messages really included the names of the developer team.
That's so
Well done. All right. Dalia, Mel, David, thanks so much for joining me. It was a pleasure having you here.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day, guys.
everyone.